Hey guys, welcome back to the pod. It's been, I think, a couple weeks. I don't really remember, to be honest.
Yeah.
We've kind of been hit and miss the last couple weeks. We've been busy, but we'll try to get them up. And this is actually week. What week is it technically in college football?
Week 7.
Yeah, so this pod's gonna recap the four top 10 losses, like Washington losing to Arizona State, Clemson losing to Syracuse on Friday night, Washington State losing to Cal on Friday night, and then Auburn losing to LSU. So that's the week that we're recapping here, and then we'll look forward to the next week, which is games like Penn State, Michigan, I believe. I'm trying to think of the other games. Notre Dame plays USC, so we'll certainly talk about that. It's a pretty big matchup. But yeah, I guess we'll just get. I guess I'll say what the actual schedule is for the pod, so you guys kind of know. We'll recap those games, like I said. We'll get into our top 5 for, like, at least for Addison and I. We're missing. If you guys have watched the pod before, I don't think we're gonna get Corey from Denver tonight on a call. We're missing Steele right now. He's on paternity leave, basically. So it'll just be basically our top 5s. And we haven't discussed this yet before the pod or anything, but I was thinking like top 5, like your 5 best teams, not the teams that are like most deserving or anything, because then like TCU would be in there.
Yeah.
I guess spoiler, I don't have TCU in my top 5. So, but we'll talk about that. We'll preview next week, and then we'll talk about our bets the last couple of weeks, how the podcast has been doing. We're still on a pretty darn good roll. You killed it last week. I just actually looked this up like 10 minutes ago. So
Another good week for most of us.
So yeah, I guess let's get right into these top 10 teams that lost. Finally, we have some chaos this year. And being Ohio State fans, I don't know, I was kind of happy to see some other teams kind of bite the bullet for once. And
a few others almost lost too. I mean, you had Oklahoma. They pulled it out at the end. Miami pulled it out at the end. So we could have seen other teams go down
for
too.
Sure.
It was a good weekend of football for sure.
Yeah. I guess let's just get into Clemson, Syracuse.
Yeah.
I'll let you start. What did you see out of the game? Give me more like, do you think a lot differently about Clemson now than you did before that game, or like what do you think about them?
A lot of people thought that Clemson was just going to like cruise through the season, I think.
Yeah.
And whenever this happens every year, people think teams are unbeatable, and then upsets always happen. It happens every single year. Once people start talking about teams are unbeatable or they're like the best ever or something, they always lose.
Every single national champion in the playoff era lost a game at home.
Yeah.
That year. So yeah.
Yeah, this one was road, but
you're right. Yeah. Somebody lost. That's
you made your point.
Yeah.
I was surprised because Syracuse played really well.
They
definitely outplayed Clemson.
Yeah.
Kelly Bryant went out of this game with an injury in the first half, of concussion, I think. Right?
Yeah. Well, I thought it was interesting because he had a sprained ankle from the week before in the game against Wake, I believe it was. Yeah. And there was a lot of questions during the game whether he should have been in the game at all. It looked like he was having a lot of trouble getting around on that ankle. And I was even questioning myself, like if you're a football fan, you talk about like, oh, suck it up, like tape your ankle up or whatever. But it looked like I think he was moving around well enough to where he could protect himself. But I did start to wonder, as often as he was getting hit, I was like, I don't know if is capable of just sitting in the pocket. Like, he thinks he can still run and play on instinct. And he was getting chased down. Syracuse was going for his ankle. And, like, every team's going to do that. It's not dirty. It's just, like, if you're going to tackle the guy, you're going to tackle him where he's hurt, basically. So
yeah, that's expected.
Yeah. So he definitely went out, and the committee definitely takes that into consideration. It's the human element they take into consideration.
I don't think it would have mattered. Syracuse played well.
I think it would have either. He was really hindering them on offense. And the Zarek Cooper kid that came in, he showed flashes of potential, but he's a freshman. He's never played. That's a lot to expect.
I mean, he didn't make any mistakes. Right. He didn't do anything spectacular either.
But you're right. I really think this game was more about Syracuse outplaying them. Syracuse has some good playmakers on the outside on offense. Dungy's really gritty at quarterback.
Yeah, they do, and we like Babers as a coach.
Yeah, he gets his guys up for big games. Defensively, like we said, I think Clemson was struggling with their problems at quarterback, but they did enough. I was really surprised. I don't know about you. was really surprised at how leaky Clemson was in the secondary in this game.
Yeah, so was I.
Clemson showed no vulnerabilities this year, really, as far as like defending like Lamar Jackson. I mean, I'm sure he made a couple plays in that game, but they've been seen as almost like, I mean, invincible on defense. And Syracuse really, I don't know if Syracuse laid out the blueprint for how to beat Clemson, or Syracuse that was just their night. Which
I don't think. I could be wrong. I don't think Clemson's D line was really, dominating like they have in a lot of the games early this
Dungy,
year.
I think he made some plays like kind of when he did get flushed and stuff, but he seemed to have time, and they seemed to hit like. There seemed like a couple broken, or I guess like miscommunications in the secondary. Like there was a couple plays that Syracuse hit that there was nobody within 10 yards of him. So.
And I mean, Dungy, he rushed for 61 yards. Too,
yeah. So really interesting game. I just think it's one of those nights where I think being like Buckeye fans, we talked about the OSU Oklahoma game where I think we just had a bad night. And Oklahoma just outcoached us, outplayed us. I don't want to make this about us every time we do the pod, but like I think it's the same thing for Clemson. I think people are going to overreact to this game. I think they're going to say, "Oh man, Clemson lost as a 24-point favorite." I think Syracuse just showed up and they played better, and that happens sometimes.
Sometimes it's tough to play in the dome. We saw
really
Virginia
tough.
Tech go in there and lose last year.
Yeah, sorry, Corey.
And this is one that a bunch of us had. We were watching. We had Syracuse plus 24.
I think it was pretty. Well, I think Steele maybe didn't have it, but you
me and
Corey,
Corey
all had Syracuse plus 24. Like we really felt like this was going to be a tough game for Clemson.
Yeah.
I was thinking more like. I felt like borderline lockish. Well, I mean, we liked the Michigan-Indiana under, which should have never fucking gotten.
It shouldn't have gotten close. I don't even know how.
But the Syracuse game was like my second most confident right there, like maybe my 1A. Like I really thought Clemson was going to win maybe like 10 to 14 points. I definitely didn't think they were going to lose the game.
Yeah.
But
in fairness to that Michigan under, like regulation, it was under even with that late flurry from Indiana. It's just we got screwed by overtime. That's the worst thing ever.
Worst
when
thing
your under gets smashed by overtime.
So what do you think about Clemson? We'll get into. I guess you know what. Let's wait and see if you have them in the top 5.
Yeah.
I think kind of spoiler. Like I think people might overreact to that game a little bit, but we'll see. And Kelly Bryant's health is the biggest thing for sure. Because if he's out coming up, and they've got a couple interesting games coming up. We'll get their schedule up maybe, but
hang on.
Yeah, we'll get that up, but that's definitely gonna be the most important thing. I mean, if Zarek Cougar comes in
next up, Georgia Tech. That's
gonna be
they do have a bye.
tough game.
It's pretty big that they have a bye that gives them the extra time to prepare for the option and everything. It's a home game. Gives Kelly Bryant a chance to get healthy. So after that, though, they've got NC State right after, and then they host Florida State.
So
and then, at the end of the year, too, they play at South Carolina.
And that's a rival game. South Carolina's played pretty well in a lot. South Carolina this year.
Yes, actually, I can't figure that team out. Early in the season,
beat NC State.
Early in the season, they covered. Yeah, they beat NC State. They covered some games where they maybe got lucky to cover, and then so I kind of wrote them off after that. And then they lost their best player on offense, Deebo Samuel.
Right.
And I know that they've actually responded though and played well.
Okay, let's move on, and we'll get through these next 3, I think, a little more quickly, just so we can get going. Washington State and Cal, there's really not a lot to talk about, in my opinion. I think
not a lot to talk about since this was just a beatdown.
I think Washington State I think all of us in the pod didn't think, well, maybe besides Steele, I think we didn't really think Washington State was that elite of a team. They certainly had earned their ranking and their right. I think we're starting to see at this point in the year how good teams and conferences really are. Maybe some teams haven't played really quite anybody yet. I think definitely when we get deeper into the conference schedule, we'll start to find out as we do every year. But, Washington State beating USC, that seemed like a really big deal. And now we're starting to see maybe USC's not quite as good as we thought. Cal brought it on defense, which is shocking.
Yeah, their D played amazing. It seems like they were like picking off every single Luke Falk pass.
Falk played
they had 7 turnovers.
Poorly. If you guys saw the Pirates press conference after that, Mike Leach just basically said they were a bunch of pathetic front runners and nobody played well. He tried defending his quarterback a little bit, which isn't shocking with Leach, but it's hard to defend how they played. I don't have anything else to add. They, in my opinion, are out of the playoff. I don't think you can lose like that. who knows?
I
Maybe,
have the same kind of thinking. I mean, they could win out and they'd have a good resume, but yeah, when you're putting them up against, probably another one-loss team to get in the playoff, having a beatdown like that on your resume to me is very damaging.
It's really bad. And Cal's not like, it's not like they got beat down by, like Stanford or like, I don't know. Even
this isn't a good team that just dominated.
Yeah, Cal's not a very good team. But Cal showed up to play just like Syracuse did. It was Friday the 13th. Weird shit happened.
Yep.
So the next one I guess we'll get into is, I guess kind of in order, it was Auburn, LSU. We both actually had LSU +7, I believe, or do we have the hook? I don't remember.
We had +7.
So we had LSU +7.
And early on, we were not happy about that bet. Auburn goes up 20-0. This looked like LSU against like Mississippi State again when they just got housed.
Right.
And I really didn't think there was any chance they were going to come back. And wow, pretty surprised by the result of that.
I mean the fact that Edo spotted Auburn and Gus Malzahn 20 points and then came back to win the game is pretty amazing. I actually wrote this game off so much so that I just stopped checking my phone for the score.
Me too. I kind of stopped paying attention to it for a while, and then I saw LSU was like creeping back, and then I caught the end of the game when they took the lead and then held on for the win.
And it's going to be tricky for a lot of teams that play a team like LSU where, they've struggled this year with some consistency, but maybe they're starting to gain a little confidence where they beat Florida. LSU at home, that's one of the toughest places to play in the country. Catching a touchdown, we felt pretty confident with that. And so, I don't know. To be honest, I didn't get to watch the game. I don't know if Auburn just took their foot off the gas and just kind of thought they were going to stomp them the rest of the way. And you can't take your foot off the gas against a roster that has a bunch of 5- and 4-star athletes on it. I mean, you just can't.
Yeah.
And so
Jared Stidham had a really rough game too. He's only 9 of 26.
Yeah, and the thing
165
about
yards.
Auburn that's interesting is I think people after the Clemson game were like, okay, well, Auburn lost. Maybe they're not so good. Then Auburn went kind of on a roll. They looked very good recently. The only two good teams Auburn's played this year, though, against they were in the game obviously, but they did lose both games. So Auburn's kind of interesting.
That's the thing I was thinking about Auburn going into this game. They definitely don't have. I mean, you can say this about a lot of teams, but they haven't beaten anyone.
Yeah,
really.
yeah, right. Yeah, we could definitely say that about a lot of different teams right now. But so I think. It's interesting. I don't think it should be that shocking that LSU did win that game, and we'll see how Auburn rebounds. Last game of those top 10 matchups that we're going to discuss that, are not top 10 matchups, but top 10 upsets. Washington played Arizona State really late at night, Pac-12 after dark. Washington just didn't show up to play. I mean, Arizona State's defense,
it's funny,
Todd Graham brought it.
That's funny that Arizona State plays defense now, I guess.
I don't know.
Washington, I definitely don't think they're as explosive on offense this year, which is kind of surprising since they brought back most of their guys.
Yeah.
I mean, defensively they've been really good.
Right.
I mean, they held a team to 13 points and they lost.
Right.
So, and they were getting shut out until late in that game.
I don't think either team got to 300 total yards.
No,
right?
no, they were both under 300 yards.
Yeah.
I had the under in this one. Washington's kind of been an auto under team this year. And I know that line moved down a lot before kickoff.
Yeah.
And I mean, it ended up being way under. So, I mean, that's just kind of how Washington has been this year.
Yeah, I think they were one of my more overrated teams coming into the year, to be honest. I mean, I don't know. Not that they couldn't be good enough to win that conference and go to the playoff, but I think a lot of people were expecting this team just to kind of step right back into what they were doing last year, and I just didn't feel it. I mean, they did lose a couple. Buda Baker was a big loss. I'm not saying that that should be a huge loss as far as them losing multiple games or something, but
I was a little surprised just because we watched that week 1 game against Rutgers, and I didn't think Washington looked very good in that game for a team that's supposed to be a top 5 or 10-ish team.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
But then last few weeks it looked like they were getting it together. They had some good wins.
They did, yeah.
But then last night wasn't good.
Right. Okay, so those 4 games obviously happened. The upsets happened, and that just proves that you can't just assume anything. I think right now the one thing that everybody just assumes is Bama's just going to roll.
Yeah, and you don't know.
I'm not saying they couldn't, or maybe it's not probable. But
I mean, yeah. Is there a game I can point to and say they're going to lose that game? No,
right, right.
Unexpected things happen.
Yeah,
I feel like this past weekend, it was a fun weekend of football. It felt like the season, like the real season, is really beginning now with the chaos that we saw. We're in the middle of conference play now.
And I think a lot of teams, like at the beginning of the year, you have a little room for error. Like Ohio State, for example, maybe Oklahoma with their loss to Iowa State, maybe they had room to lose that game because they did beat Ohio State handedly in the horseshoe. So, I mean, I think now, though, when we're getting into conference play and the teams maybe have a loss going into every game, there's like not a whole lot of room for error anymore. No two-loss teams ever made the playoff. I think this year there's two things as we kind of transition into like our top fives here, and I'll start if you want me to.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'll get back into that. Well, I guess I'll finish that thought. I think this year could be the first year that we see either one of two things. I think that a two-loss team could get in this year, possibly. I also think that potentially two teams from one conference could get in. And I think that's either the SEC with Alabama and Georgia, or that's the Big Ten with Ohio State, Penn State. I think those scenarios make the most sense. I can't really see two Pac-12 schools getting in. I can't see with Florida State's if Francois still would have been there and like Clemson, Florida State would have been maybe undefeated, then that could have been the case. But
there are two conferences that could possibly get two in, I think.
And like
SEC,
that's still
Big Ten.
Like the committee really doesn't.
Yeah, they don't want to do it. What's interesting, so far, like you said, we haven't seen a two-loss team. We also haven't seen in a conference championship, I don't think, a big upset that where like the better team that was like probably going to be in the playoff lost and gave the committee a really tough decision. We haven't really seen that yet. But it's going to happen eventually.
Well, I think the toughest.
Like, say Bama.
I was going to say that's
Bama losing to like Florida or something in the
scenario.
SEC championship.
Yeah. That's the scenario. Or let's say like Georgia loses to Auburn and Georgia Tech, and they beat Alabama.
Yeah.
What do you do with the one-loss Bama that lost in the SEC title game? I think most everybody would say that's still one of the best four teams, and that's the point of the playoff. It's supposed to be the best four teams, not necessarily the most deserving. Now, with the best four, you use resumes and that kind of mixes and such. But
we know you don't have to win your conference, though.
Yeah. Ohio State proved that last year. They didn't rep it very well. But anyway, so my top five teams right now. Now, this is not most deserving to get in the playoff. I'm not going just based on, like, if you're undefeated, then you're ahead of teams that you beat. It might not even be, there could be two one-loss teams where a team beat a team. And, for example, I have Ohio State ahead. I don't even have Oklahoma in this top five, but I have Ohio State in there. Yeah, I'm an Ohio State fan. I don't really give a fuck. I just think that I'll just go down the list anyway. I've got Alabama number one. They haven't done anything to me to prove that they shouldn't be number one. It's interesting when people say they haven't played anybody yet. They were kind of pretty close in that game with Florida State until Francois got hurt. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what Bama does against Auburn and LSU. I believe they still have. So
their schedule isn't, compared to past seasons, is not as daunting as usual.
No, they just have the back-to-back weeks. They're going to have two of the biggest spreads in SEC history, where they were 36-point favorites against Arkansas. This week, they're 35 or 34-point favorites opening against Tennessee.
And I just think that says something about the SEC more than it does Bama.
Bama's
not better than they've been. Yeah, right. The SEC
it's way down. Yeah. So I have Alabama number one. There's nothing. I don't think you really. We don't need to debate it. I guess you could have like somebody else in there, but I think that's pretty easy. I actually do have Georgia number two. I think that it's interesting with Georgia. The only test they've really had this year is Notre Dame so far. That game was 2019, but they pretty much dominated Notre Dame as far as what both teams do best. Like Georgia, when I looked back at that game a little bit, looked at the stats and a little bit of advanced stats, they seem to really control the lines as far as running the ball and stopping the run. I think we'll find out more about Notre Dame in the upcoming weeks as well. They've got 5 ranked teams that they play. But I think Georgia still has Auburn to play. They still have Georgia Tech. So they've got some interesting games coming up. They most likely are going to be playing Alabama in the SEC championship game. So I do like what I've seen from Georgia, though. Their defense is very nasty. I like that they can control the line with the running game. I think Fromm is developing. We'll see how he does when he gets into some bigger games coming up. Clemson, I have 3. Some of you guys might be surprised by that. You say, well, Clemson just lost to a team they should have blown out, basically. I think people will overreact to that loss. I think this team with a healthy Kelly Bryant is very dangerous. They pretty much, even though the score is 14-6, they pretty much owned Auburn. The Louisville one's not looking as good anymore,
No.
but they definitely dominated Louisville at Louisville.
Also, Louisville, let's just make fun of them for a second.
Yeah.
They lost at home to BC, and they gave up 45 points.
Yeah, BC, sometimes it takes them 4 weeks to get 45 points, so that's really bad.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's a bad loss.
Yeah.
You deserve to get called out for it.
Yeah,
so.
Louisville, you're not good. You guys thought you'd be good. And on the podcast and the ACC preview, we all pretty much said you're not going to do anything. So you guys suck. But you suck this year. You might be better at some point, but I don't know. I think your coach will leave again because he's a snake and he sucks. So, But I do like Clemson. I think when we're just talking about talent, pure talent right now, what I've seen is the body of work so far. Yeah, they got outplayed by Syracuse. Maybe Syracuse is better than we think. We'll see how Syracuse does the rest of the year. But I like Clemson still.
Syracuse is a pesky team, I think.
Yeah. I still like Clemson, though, and I think we'll see Bryant is definitely the X factor as far as his health. I have Ohio State 4. I know a lot of you guys are going to hate on that. We've played a bunch of shit teams that we've killed. The only meaningful game that we played, we got our asses kicked in. I think it's similar to Clemson. We, even though we did play a pretty darn good team in Oklahoma that night, they showed up ready to play. We were outcoached, outplayed. I think you'll agree with me on this at least. Even though we've played nobody, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of other teams in the country that would have made it look as easy as we've had the last few weeks. I think the offense is really starting to find their stride. I think the secondary has improved. I'm still a little skeptical. I kind of want to see them against Penn State in 2 weeks. There's going to be a bye week for Ohio State here, which is huge. Penn State's going to have a very physical matchup that we're about to preview coming up against Michigan. I think it'll be interesting. That's going to be, I think, the Big Ten's big kind of like flagship game. We're going to find out who we think, I think we'll find out who the conference's best team is. You could argue Wisconsin, but we're not going to know anything about Wisconsin until the Big Ten championship game. And it's a one-game scenario. So, but I do really think Ohio State's talent, their coaching staff, I think everything's really starting to mesh. So I have them 4. Penn State I have at 5. They have been pretty darn solid this year. They had a little bit of a scare at Iowa where they had to basically win the game on the last play of the game. We've talked about this. Iowa is a tough place to play, and there's some weird shit that goes on there at night. Yeah. So they're not, a terrible team, but I think Penn State is very solid. I saw that they're opening as, I think, 11 or 10-point favorites against Michigan at home coming up, and if they get through that game healthy and they get the win, then they get to prove it against Ohio State in the shoe that next weekend. So those are my top 5 teams. You could argue, teams like Oklahoma, if you want to say Miami's up there. I just, from a pure talent standpoint and from, just the standpoint of who I think the best teams on the field are, regardless of what's happened so far up to this point now, those are my 5 teams.
Yeah. Well, I'll agree with your number 1, of course. I don't know who doesn't have Bama number 1.
Yeah,
so most talent.
Great
they
coach.
haven't, like you said, they haven't done anything
No
that really gives you a reason to take them out of the top spot.
Yeah.
So my number 2, I have Penn State, another undefeated team. Of the top 5, actually, really of all the top teams besides Oklahoma, or until you get to like Oklahoma State,
right?
They're the most complete offensive team.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of why I have them where I have them.
They're very balanced.
And I always talk about how much I like Saquon Barkley as a player. Even when teams like try to sell out and take him away, they've been able to throw the football, and get it done that way. And defensively, I don't know how good they are defensively, but statistically, they've been, one of the best defenses in the country this year. So we'll find out more when they play us.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Georgia, I have number 3. I don't think, they're great throwing the football or anything.
It's true,
but they can run it. They have one of the best defenses in the country. Maybe the top D. So Georgia. Then I got Clemson, number 4. Even despite the loss, I still have them as definitely a top 5 team. People might overreact to the loss to Syracuse, but they do have the bye coming up this week, so
Yeah, they'll hopefully get healthy. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
for their sake, they'll get healthy. And but yeah,
I mean, yeah, they lost a game last year. Usually teams are going to have a loss going into the playoff. There's only been one undefeated team every single year going in, and that team has never won the playoff. So one loss, not killer.
Yeah.
There's no reason to panic. If you're
I mean, if they went out, they're in.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I just feel like
any Power 5 team that only has one loss, should be feeling pretty good.
Yeah.
At the end of the year. And 5, I have Ohio State up there. I think, like you said, that we've definitely been improving. You can say that it's because of the teams we've played. I think that we've actually done some things that are making us better. I said after the loss to Oklahoma, if we're going to stick with JT at quarterback, we need to actually run an offense that is better suited for JT. Looks like we're actually doing that. JT looks like he's been playing better. It's because the reason I say that is it's the things that are independent of who we're playing, like just being more accurate, putting the ball where it needs to be so the receivers, can catch it in stride, and make plays with it. He's been doing things like that better, in my opinion. The offense is more of a, short passing game, kind of extension of the run game type of offense now, which is good. We get the ball out of JT's hands quick. He doesn't have to make tougher throws. Our receivers aren't very good at running routes or catching, so it's easier for them. But we've got some playmakers who are good with the ball in their hands. So
very good.
Another thing that I liked this past weekend against Nebraska was kind of the power running game that we saw. We were using Marcus Baugh and Rashad Berry as kind of
lead blockers.
Yeah, basically
almost.
fullbacks.
Yeah.
And I like that kind of offense. We haven't really seen too much of that this year, so that's something that hopefully we'll be incorporating a little more into our offense.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that when we start playing the tough teams on our schedule, that we're going to hopefully lean a little more on the running game because with Dobbins, the way he's been playing this year, it's been pretty amazing for a true freshman.
Oh yeah, he's undoubtedly. I mean, he's one of the best backs we've seen come through in the school's history, I think, so far for that age. So
yeah.
Real quick before we get into, I guess, previewing next week, we have the same top 5, just different order.
Yeah, different
so
order.
For each team, just right off the top of your head, give me just one thing you would want to you question that you want to see more of. So Alabama, what's something that maybe you're skeptical of them on that you want to see them in the next few weeks do better, or maybe you want to see them tested. For example, I want to see them challenged at least somewhat in the running game to where Hurts has to make plays down the field.
Yeah, that's always the question ever since the national championship game too,
Right.
where Clemson just realized that we do everything we can to stop the run and see if he can beat us,
yeah.
and he really struggled in that situation. So I want to see another team force him into that position and see how he responds.
What'd be interesting is even I know there's a lot of games in between this, but let's say hypothetically Georgia and Bama meet each other in the SEC championship game,
Yeah.
and let's say it's pretty much decided that whoever wins that game gets in. Maybe both were to get in. Who knows? Those two teams might challenge each other in that aspect. But
Yeah.
Georgia's the same thing. I think that's the only concern I have about Georgia is can Fromm win the game, or can he not even win the games? We talked about that with JT Barrett. Can he make enough plays to keep them balanced to where they can run the football with a little more ease?
I would expect an ugly game.
Yeah, I would say
It
so.
definitely wouldn't be like the last couple SEC championships where Bama is playing a completely overmatched team from the East.
Yeah.
Georgia can actually play with Bama,
For
in
sure.
my opinion. So
Yeah. For Clemson, I want to see them against more passing attacks again. It was really troublesome to me to see them be that leaky in the secondary, and not even just miscommunications, but it looked like a lot of just guys not being in the right spots. It was really strange to me to see that. So I would expect them with they have a great defensive coordinator. I think they would fix that and clean that up, but I think the easy thing to point out is we want to see Bryant get healthy. But we know what they can do with him, and he's been pretty solid for them. But for me, I want to see their secondary, their back seven, against some more passing attacks.
Yeah. The interesting thing, though, is, a lot of these teams, I've been saying it, a lot of these top teams are very run-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
So in the playoff, I don't know who's going to really throw it all over you.
That's true.
Unless it's a Big 12 team, because we know that they will.
Right.
But I don't know. We don't know if the Big 12 is going to even be in the playoff this year.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are looking at TCU and that TCU Oklahoma game coming up. Oklahoma State, if they were to win out. The thing is, there's a Big 12 championship game this year, so it's really going to throw a wrench in.
It's going to give an extra loss to someone. It could end up really backfiring on the conference.
Yeah, it really could, which would be kind of funny.
I hope it. Yeah, because they can't seem to get anything right as a conference in terms of decisions like that that boost their image or whatever. So it'd just be funny if this ended up hurting them again.
Yeah. Ohio State, I think it's pretty obvious. We want to see how the offense and JT look specifically against like a roster that has comparable talent. So I want to see them against Penn State off the bye week, and then moving forward, I think Michigan State and Michigan will be really good challenges for that offense. And then I'm still a little skeptical about the secondary. And, I know we're going to probably list a few things with Ohio State. It's just because we know that team better than any other team. Something else that they really have, the O-line's, I'm not going to, try to nitpick too much, but I've kind of worried a little bit about, I don't like when Urban Meyer says, he almost feels like he has to, kind of coach them up and be like, hey, be competitive, be nasty. I want my linemen just to naturally be nasty. So
that's not something you really want to hear about your
especially when we're talking about them facing off against teams maybe not as much Penn State, but Michigan's D line, possibly let's say down the road scenario, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson. That's not shit we want to hear. So I think if I'm going to pick one thing though, because I think we'll stick to the rules of this, I want to see the offense and its efficiency against a good roster. So.
The secondary, Ward's been playing really well.
Mm-hmm.
We want to see the other corner, whoever it is, play well.
Yeah, they're starting to play some more freshmen and sophomores to maybe. I think it looks like they're riding with our Dale Arnett and Sheffield. Arnett seems to be playing actually a little bit better. Sheffield has still been kind of questioned.
Gets a lot of penalties.
Yeah, he's just out of position a lot. Good athlete. Bama had him in their roster, so. Penn State will be the last one. This will be a good transition. I think we'll go to the Penn State-Michigan game. For Penn State, for me, this game is actually going to be a very good barometer for me as far as my thing that concerns me about Penn State, and that's their offensive line. Their offensive line has been pretty good this year, but we haven't, I think, seen them quite yet against a really talented defensive front.
And they'll play one of the best. Well, against Michigan and then us. That's 2 in a row.
And so, you guys will really find out how good Penn State is, because if the O-line's pretty shaky, which I kind of think it might be, McSorley tends to get really frustrated. If teams can really dictate the line of scrimmage and contain Barkley, I don't think Penn State wants to get in a position where McSorley's literally just slinging it around the yard.
Yeah.
And there could be, in close games, turnovers and field position are so much more prominent.
He's
factors.
also he's not a big.
No, he's
dude,
small. He can get beat up. He's 6 foot.
Yeah, so if you get
205, 210.
you get some shots on him.
Yeah,
he's gonna.
So that's my concern with them. Do you have another concern, or is that similar?
Pretty much. Just
that. Transition into that game, the Michigan game. It's an interesting one. I think that spread opened at about 11.5. It's already down 10. And I think that. On the surface, Michigan the last few weeks, I think people are starting to say fraudulent. They're starting to say this team just can't score. They can't move the ball enough on offense. They can't score in the red zone. That might be true. If they face other elite teams, if they play a team like Alabama or Georgia, I think they'd be in a lot of trouble just because they're playing similar styles of football with less talent, especially at the quarterback position. It seems like we thought O'Korn going into last week was maybe better than Spate for them, and he looked really fucking terrible. So it'll be interesting, but like we just said, I think, as far as football goes, it's all about matchups. Michigan's going to present a really serious matchup problem, I think, on the line with their defensive front to where, Penn State's been a cover machine this year, but I'm not saying this is going to be my bet. I don't know yet, but I think off the top of my head, I think I would take Michigan in points just because I think it's going to be really tough for Penn State to really move the chains consistently. And they might get some big plays, and maybe that's where they break the game open. Maybe Michigan Michigan can't just score field goals in this game to win the game. When they get in the red zone, the key for me is if Michigan can get to the red zone, period, they got to score some touchdowns. They can't settle for field goals because Penn State eventually is going to get somebody in the end zone, or Barkley will break one open. As good of a defense as you can be, Michigan, there's going to be probably some bigger plays from an explosive offense.
Yeah. Michigan, if you haven't been paying attention this year, has been pretty terrible on offense, especially in the red zone.
Yeah.
They've got to be last in the country.
Putrid.
It seems like they settle for field goals every single time. I kind of think that Harbaugh thinks field goals are better than touchdowns. So they're worth more or something.
Yeah, right. He's so old school somehow, I don't know,
Yeah. But, defensively, they're lights out. The spread being double digits, I would definitely, if anything, take Michigan. I think they can always keep a game close. Yeah, they're going to struggle to score points.
Right.
But their defense is definitely good enough to keep them in any game. I would probably.
If we're
you said it's
bet,
10 right now.
Yeah, it's down to 10.
Actually, let me pull.
Or you can look up. I think on Bovada it was 10.
Yeah,
it definitely was at 11.5 2 hours ago. And I think people were hammering that right away.
Yeah, and Michigan, like you said, losing 2 weeks ago, and then going to OT with Indiana this past week is another reason people are going to be kind of down on Michigan.
Undervalued, yeah.
Yeah, so, another reason to lean towards them, I'd say.
I think so, yeah. We'll see what the line is here. But, yeah, if Michigan dictates the line of scrimmage, especially on the defensive front, that's going to be a big problem for Penn State. But, I think we're expecting Penn State to win this game. And I don't think it's a situation where maybe some people might say maybe Penn State looks ahead to Ohio State, but Penn State knows that they need to win this football game.
Penn State, they can't overlook Michigan, especially they lost by 30 to them last year.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think there's a lot riding on. I think at least a lot of people say revenge is a big factor.
Yeah.
So
Penn State comes into this game too off a bye.
Yeah, which is big for them.
All right, right now it's 10.
Yeah. So
it probably will keep coming down. So if you want Michigan, you should probably get it.
Yeah, I'd say grab it right now if you want them. But yeah, so as far as that game goes, I think we both like Penn State to win. But
Penn State to win, yeah, I would take the points though.
A grittier game, yeah. I think it'll be. I'm definitely curious to see how physical Penn State is willing to play, and if they show up and they, I guess out physical Michigan somehow, then that will set up for a really. It's gonna be a big matchup anyway, but that's gonna be a serious matchup on the 28th against Ohio State.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll move on to. I don't have them written down, but so USC Notre Dame, that would be the next one.
Yeah.
This is an interesting game because I don't think we know how truly good either of these teams are. I think we're starting to get an idea that. I think you would agree with me. I think USC is a little overrated coming into this year. And we're seeing them kind of struggle with some teams that we didn't expect them to struggle with. USC has struggled against the run this year, and that's what Notre Dame is very, very good at. I think they're 7th in the nation as far as total rushing offense or something like that. Steele sent some stat.
Oh, yeah. Well, rushing, they might be number one.
They might be one as far as
game.
Yeah. So
they're up there. They're probably top 5.
Yeah. So
they're up there with the option teams, which is kind of crazy.
Right. So it seems on the surface that Notre Dame, that's where they could have a big plus matchup, and that's a huge one to have if you can control the game as far as the line of scrimmage, running the football. It keeps Notre Dame's defense off the field, where maybe.
Coming off a bye in this one as well, too.
Right, and they could possibly struggle in some spots against Darnold and some of the athletes that USC has. Although, Darnold this year seems like he's been pressing a little bit. I don't know if it's the pressure. I don't know if their O-line is definitely not quite as good as I think people thought it was going to be this year. So he's made some really questionable decisions and thrown a couple bad balls and some important spots in games. Give them credit. They came back against Utah and were able to win that game, and maybe that's a sign of a good football team. But this one's interesting. The line is at 4, I believe, and I think most of the money's been on Notre Dame so far. At 4, just because of that number, I think I would take USC. I'm not in love with that, and I think it's probably just a clear no-bet situation for me. But, if the game's at 3, then I think I just take Notre Dame. I think it's just a matter of just the number.
Yeah.
I think it's close enough to where this game's going to be a good one. I'll be curious to see. Notre Dame is off a bye, so I don't expect Brandon Wimbush to be healthy again and playing now. Not that he's been like a huge X factor this year. He's, I think, definitely been a little worse as far as throwing the ball than we thought he would be. Steele in our pod was hyping him up pretty good, and I was expecting him to be a little bit better through the air. Now, I'm not sure if Notre Dame's pass protection hasn't been quite as good, if the receivers haven't been quite as good. I haven't watched them like some of you guys might have, but from the footage that I've seen, I did see a decent amount of the Georgia game. Seems like he doesn't trust his reads. It seems like he's kind of like reading a guy and then he's just deciding to run, and he is a great athlete, so he's been able to do pretty well with that. But, if Notre Dame's able to lean heavily on the running game, maybe get a couple turnovers off of Darnold, then they'll win that football game, I think.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
I agree with you. I would take the points here if I had to.
Yeah,
I'm
not sure it's a.
I don't see myself betting this game for sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't really know what to make of either team, honestly.
Yeah.
USC. I've thought since the preseason that they're probably overhyped. That USC being who they are, that just tends to happen.
Yeah.
People want them to be good.
Right.
This past week, they almost lost to Utah. Utah actually scored late in that game and opted to go for 2 and the win instead of just sending the game to OT. So USC almost picked up their second loss.
Right.
They've had a couple games that they could have lost in addition to the Washington State game that they lost. So I mean, they haven't been looking like,
they could have 3 losses.
Yeah, they could.
Seriously, yeah.
They haven't looked like an elite team, that's for sure.
Right.
Notre Dame, I mean, look, probably their most impressive game is the loss.
Yeah, to Georgia. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I think Georgia really did dictate the line of scrimmage pretty well in that game, but Notre Dame was in the game and could have definitely won that football game. There was some late game kind of crazy stuff that started to happen, and it could have swung either way, but
I just don't know what Notre Dame is yet. I mean, they did beat Michigan State pretty easily. They haven't played a lot of besides Georgia. They haven't really played a lot of teams. Right. Actually, they played some pretty bad teams. UNC is terrible.
Yeah,
Temple's
awful.
Boston College, Miami, Ohio.
Yeah, these are all terrible teams.
So and we've seen them.
They have covered in those games, though.
Yeah.
I'll give them that. They have covered.
They have been great throwing the football, which is surprising to me.
Yeah.
Like you said, Wimbush.
And Kelly's offenses are just built for the quarterbacks. I don't want to get into like the whole system and stuff like that with quarterbacks, but they usually are very productive throwing.
Yeah, they've got good receivers.
Yeah.
But their running game's been dominant, so they haven't had to do anything else.
Yeah. And I think that's good for them. I think Kelly gets real pass happy, and that's lost them a lot of games that they should have won over the years. Like, I think it's really good that they're focusing on the power run.
I mean, their O-line's really good. They got,
NFL bodies up front.
A lot of guys.
Sure.
So it makes sense to just lean on that.
Yeah. If we had to make a prediction just right now, like who wins the game, do you have one?
I don't know. It's like a coin flip to me. I don't know.
Is. I'll give Notre Dame the win with a field goal. And I'll just say that I said USC was going to cover 4, but I think it's really that close. I really think it's a flip a coin, and I don't know.
If I'm going to pick straight up, I'd just go with USC.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm definitely biased here, too. I want Notre Dame to lose.
Yeah.
This is surprising that the ESPN's FPI is giving Notre Dame a 78% chance to win this game, which is like crazy high. Yeah. And the spread being 4 obviously doesn't indicate that Notre Dame has a 78% chance to win. So I don't know. I don't really like the FPI anyway.
Yeah. So. No, we don't use that. So, is there any other games we need to preview this week before we get into like kind of the last 2 parts of this? I think
those are the 2 biggest games. They're both at night, 7:30. So.
Okay. All right, well, we'll move on. I mean, there's probably some other like middle tier games. Oklahoma State plays Texas. I mean, Tennessee and Alabama in earlier years maybe would be something worth talking about, but Tennessee is a straight dumpster fire, so we don't need to talk about that. I'm actually surprised they still have a head coach. So.
The other, I guess, kind of intriguing game on the schedule is Oklahoma at Kansas State.
Yeah, Kansas State didn't look too good last week against TCU with the backup quarterback in. If Ertz was healthy, I think it might be a little more interesting. Now, the thing is, Kansas State at home, Bill Snyder as a dog, they're very good usually, no matter what. So That will be interesting. I think I want to see more from Oklahoma as I break my pen. I want to see more from them. The last 3 weeks, I mean, the Texas win is decently impressive. I think Texas has definitely improved.
Yeah, solid win.
But,
But the 2 weeks
they
before
struggled
that,
with Baylor, and Baylor doesn't seem to actually be that good at all.
Yeah. They looked like they had
6 losses. And then,
they looked like they had reverted back to the terrible defense that they were playing last
yeah,
year.
and then they lost to Iowa State. So, I mean,
Yeah, bad loss.
I want to see more from Oklahoma. I really want to see them go to Manhattan, Kansas, and really lay the wood and reassert themselves as the team that looked closer like the team that played Ohio State. So,
And we haven't talked a lot about TCU. That's kind of because we don't really trust TCU,
Yeah.
even though they're undefeated.
I guess we can talk about them real quickly.
The interesting thing about them is, let me pull up their
they
schedule.
have played some decent teams.
Yeah,
and won.
They've cleared a few of the hurdles that they've got in
Right.
conference play. And this is their schedule the next 2 weeks. They host Kansas, and then they're at Iowa State.
And those should be 2 wins.
Should be wins, yeah. Then they host Texas.
That 3-game stretch will be the stretch. Texas, Oklahoma, Texas Tech.
Yeah.
They'll throttle Baylor, so
Yeah.
They should.
I mean, yeah, the Oklahoma game is the real big one.
The thing about TCU is they're playing good defense this year under Gary Patterson, who used to have really good defensive teams. And all of a sudden, when they entered the Big 12, it's almost like they signed a contract saying, we won't play defense anymore. But that's where their strength of the team has been this year. They've got some athletes on offense. If Kenny Hill makes good decisions, this team can play with anybody, and they could make the playoff for sure. We don't trust him, though. And I think they're going to blow it at some point because he's going to blow it. That's just my opinion. I like Patterson in the TCU program. I do. But I just don't trust him enough to make those plays and make the smart decisions. I think they're going to drop a game eventually that could cost them. And we'll see. Who knows?
Maybe we're totally wrong about TCU, but
we could be.
I think this is a team that if they did get to the playoff, we would expect to be a heavy dog and probably get beat pretty easily if you're playing a team like Bama.
Yeah, I think they'll struggle with the teams that have the NFL front sevens and the NFL linemen. Basically, I think that's what you start to see in the playoffs. Is who has the NFL linemen. So, we covered TCU a little bit then. So I guess to get into the last 2 segments real quick, bets for. We won't cover everything the last 2 weeks. Maybe just give our best bet each from our best win from the last week, maybe our worst loss, and then our overall records, just to kind of, because I think we're at about the 50-minute mark, so we're gonna try to get it wrapped up. And then, honestly, for bets for next week, I don't feel super comfortable to give anything out yet. It is only Sunday, and that's the problem with us doing the Sunday edition of the pod. But if you just want to give maybe your best bet from last week, I mean, we did mention Syracuse already. Maybe give another one that you haven't mentioned.
Yeah.
And talk about that for a second, and then get into one of your losses. Maybe.
I mean, probably my best one was Washington, Arizona State. Like I mentioned,
Yeah. What was that? What was that number?
The under was 61, 20 points in the game.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was a really easy cover.
Yeah.
So I'd say, another one, BYU. They are definitely an auto under for me this year, just because of how bad on offense they are.
Saw a stat: BYU, Akron, Marshall, Houston.
I had Houston too. Yeah.
And Florida State, I think, have hit the under every single game this year. But yeah,
I feel like everyone, in Houston's case, people still think that they're a really good offense or something.
Offense, yeah.
They just kind of have that reputation. They play usually good defense. This past week, they got dominated by Tulsa, which is embarrassing.
Yeah, they have one of the better players in the country, and Ed Oliver, I think, at defensive tackle. He's really good. He really dictates the line, in those AAC games or whatever. So, I would say, obviously we talked about Syracuse.
We both had that. That was easy cover
that
too.
Was pretty easy. I think I'll say my best bet that we also both had was Georgia Tech. I think they probably should have won that football game. I didn't really get to see
I didn't see how they lost. I saw that they had the ball with 40 seconds to go and the lead. And I thought that they had it pretty much wrapped up. And then I saw the final score. They apparently had lost on a last-second field goal. So I don't know what happened.
I didn't see what transpired. But what I will say is that going into that game, there was a lot of stats and trends that pointed towards Miami. But, you got to pay attention, which I'm at fault for not doing this sometimes. You got to pay attention to injury. who they played the week before, if they have bye weeks, all that stuff. Georgia Tech going into this game just seemed like the right play, and they're hard to prepare for. The games are usually, I feel like their games are closer. I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm just saying.
Yeah, there were a lot of things. Miami coming off an emotional win against Florida State. I thought that.
Yeah, that's a big deal, right?
That they were
set up for
they were set up for a letdown, and they're playing a team that's tough to prepare for.
Right, and I think
they had injuries. Mark Walton being out for the year now.
Right.
Richards didn't play, right? Their top receiver. So I mean, there's two big injuries right there.
I mean, the line being 7 or 6.5, whatever it was. I think we might have bought the half point, but being around 6.5 or 7, we felt like that game was more of a flip, and so it's just I think it was a good solid bet,
and it really was a flip.
As far as like our overall records for the pods, I think that every single one of us in the pod has a winning record. I think Addison and I are both around 66%. I think Corey's slightly under that, but is winning. I think Steele is slightly above 500 for the year, but definitely still winning. So the pod overall is really doing really well. I mean, we're crushing notorious selling my picks gambler Clay Travis. We're beating his ass in picks this year, and we like.
And he gets by far the best lines every week.
He gets So we're like I've seen a lot of like handicappers, like we're, as far as a percentage, I don't have it in front of me. I'm assuming though that we have a lot of volume with Corey. So like Steele, even he has a winning record, but even having like the lower of the records, I think as far as like pure volume and adding all the stats up, I think we're probably like 63, 62%. So like we're
I'd say we're over 60%.
Yeah, we're definitely over 60. So we're crushing it. And as far as, do you have any games that you know what, we can talk about leans real quick.
Yeah, well, I was just going to scroll through here. And obviously don't have the over-unders, which a lot of us like to bet, so we just have to wait later in the week for that. I see Houston is a favorite over Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
That's only 3, though.
I saw some, like S&P had them. I think Houston was supposed to be around like a 7 or 8 point winner in that game, so that's kind of interesting to me.
New Mexico is a touchdown dog at home against Colorado State.
Yeah, the Louisville Florida State line is kind of interesting because I don't know if Florida State can score enough to like really. Yeah. I really feel like if Louisville at 7 could be a good.
Yeah, if their offense was playing better, then I think all of us would agree that Florida State dominates Louisville, especially with their D.
Yeah. I thought the Wisconsin one was interesting because Maryland's so terrible that Wisconsin's interesting to me though.
24.
Yeah, it's a lot. They aren't.
Wisconsin's not
it's not
kind
an
of
explosive
team.
offense like Ohio State. Yeah, like it's a different kind of explosive.
Yeah, so that one I think is worth thinking about.
I think I saw.
Missouri's only 14-point favorite against Idaho. That just tells you something about Missouri.
The SEC is this year, as you're looking through some games, if you find any, I don't really have any yet this week, guys. Sorry, it's Sunday. I looked at the lines real quick. I'm not real sure if I'm leaning anything quite yet. I saw Kansas's 37.5
That's a team that Kansas is one of the teams that we agreed not to bet.
Yeah, we just don't bet them. As far as some teams looking ahead that are ranked from like 10 to 25 in the AP poll right now that I think, as far as like teams that could make a run and get in the playoff potentially, I mean, any of these teams, like there's a lot of teams, Oklahoma State, SC, Virginia Tech, I mean, a lot of those types of teams could win a conference championship, get in. Teams that I still like though, even though Notre Dame's got a really tough schedule, if Notre Dame wins out, I think Notre Dame's in. They've played way too many good teams. I think they have, if they can find some balance in offense and their defense plays well enough, I think that's a team that could get in there. NC State is a team that's only at 17 right now, but they've shown that they can play really good ball against good teams. They seem to have some decent balance on offense. Their defense seems to be quite solid. I think it's a team that could really challenge Clemson. Might be the only team in the ACC that's really like a true challenger to Clemson. I mean, Miami. I don't believe in Miami. Losing Walton's a big deal.
I don't either.
Miami probably should have lost the Florida State game, and Florida State's just down. They're just not that good this year with the injuries they've had. So, and Clemson already handled Virginia Tech, so Virginia Tech's one of those teams that if they did win out, for Corey's sake, they could probably get in, but they've got some tricky games coming up too. Auburn, even though they've lost to the 2 good teams that they played, Auburn still plays Georgia and Alabama, and then they probably would play Georgia again. So, I mean, if you get those 3 wins in an SEC championship, they're not getting left out.
There are some – I'm not saying that these are going to happen, but there are some pretty funny scenarios in the SEC when you think about it.
Yeah.
So we talked about 2-loss teams, like what would it take for them to get into the playoff. SEC is probably the most likely conference to get one in if it happened, just because of the reputation and everything.
Right.
You have to go through Bama, basically,
Right.
to get there. So Auburn is in that position. Like if they won out and they got to the SEC championship game, win,
Right.
They'd have a good shot. LSU is in the same boat.
I didn't even think about them, yeah.
They would need they have 2 conference losses though, right? So it's a lot less likely for them,
Right.
because they would need Alabama to lose again. So that's less likely.
Yeah.
Auburn's not in that boat because they have a non-conference loss.
Right. And it's to Clemson. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like they would be looked at
Yeah.
pretty strongly. It's like, I don't know if we've talked about that where I guess there's such things like a good loss, but
Yeah. One that's funny, this team would also need help though. South Carolina. I don't think they have a chance of running the table,
Right.
but they still play Florida, Georgia, Clemson,
Wow, yeah.
and then they would play Bama and the
Right.
SEC
I mean, that's
championship,
like that's a hell of a resume.
yeah.
I mean, we don't
So,
think that's going to happen.
Yeah,
but
there's probably no chance of that, but yeah.
What do you think about, I got 2 last scenarios maybe to wrap it up. I want to talk about the non-Power 5, if they have a chance at all. What do you think about South Florida, UCF? If either of those teams go undefeated, do they have any hope at all?
I don't think so, because those teams really have to schedule tough out of conference.
Games, right.
If you don't, you're not even going to get looked at by the committee. USF especially just played a garbage out of conference.
USF could literally win every remaining game 100-0, and they would get 0 love for the playoffs.
Yeah.
I promise you.
I want to pull up their schedule.
Yeah, it's really bad. As far as like the conferences possibly getting 2 teams in, I think the one scenario that I think you would agree with, which makes sense, let's say Ohio State wins out, but then Penn State wins out after the Ohio State loss. That could potentially be a scenario, I think, where that could happen. I think it's more likely in the SEC with Georgia and Bama and how it would line up.
Mm-hmm.
But because, I think we're talking about Penn State then not even getting to the Big Ten championship game, which Ohio State proved that last year. But here's the thing. Agendas and money drive everything. And Ohio State's going to get some controversial nods over other teams because of how they travel and what kind of money they generate. Penn State's not the same following. Whereas,
I think Penn State would need a 2-loss. They need to be up against a 2-loss team.
Yeah, right. It's like that's probably a lot less likely. Whereas with Alabama, we're talking about Alabama being 12-0 and losing the SEC championship game in no matter what fashion, probably be close. I mean, Alabama, since Saban's been there, hasn't lost a game by more than 10 points, I think. I don't think they've ever had – they haven't had what any other teams had where they've had, like, a bigger loss and just a misstep. When they lose, it's just a good game and they just get outplayed. But so I don't know. That's kind of interesting. Maybe the SEC is the only one. I think the Big Ten is possible. I saw a guy on CBS that actually currently has projected Ohio State and Penn State in. I thought it was interesting, but I thought it was interesting just to maybe bring up and talk about.
The thing about the Big Ten, too, is last year we didn't see it. We almost saw it.
Or what about this scenario? I actually didn't even think about this.
If there's a 3-way tie in the division?
Or what if
if Wisconsin...
What if Penn State wins out and they're both 12-0 and Wisconsin beats Penn State at a field goal?
Yeah.
That's actually probably more likely than the OSU Penn State scenario, I would think.
Mm-hmm.
Because Penn State would have wins over OSU, Michigan State. Who they play out of conference? Was it anybody? I mean, they
didn't play anyone.
That doesn't count. Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. It's interesting to talk about. But
and I mean, the next few weeks it'll become a little clearer. We'll start to actually be able to talk about realistic playoff scenarios.
Yeah, I
which
think
is always fun.
After the OSU Penn State game, we'll really have a good feel for maybe what's going to go down there. So,
and at the end of the year, like in November, there's a lot of big games. It seems like
big games,
obviously you got the rivalry games.
Right.
A lot of them are going to be have a big impact in who goes, who doesn't.
Yeah, Bama, Auburn,
in Ohio State,
OSU,
Michigan.
Michigan. You're going to have, let's say, the Pac-12 scenarios. Well, Stanford plays USC.
Stanford also plays Notre Dame.
Notre Dame.
Yeah, they play Notre Dame.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah, that's what I meant, actually.
Notre Dame's got big games in November. They play Miami in
NC
November,
State,
right?
Miami.
Yeah.
These are all playoff implications. And that's the thing here. That's one thing, too, that, like, for all 8 of you that watch this podcast, if we ever got big one day, when we talk about, when people, and now here's the thing, money and agenda will drive this, like I've said, and maybe the playoffs will, I don't even think it's a maybe. I think the playoffs will be extended one day. But it's kind of, that would suck and really dilute the college football regular season, because the thing is, like, when we talk about, there's only 4 teams, maybe like the year that Ohio State won, TCU and Baylor deserve to get in. Look, TCU and Baylor played each other. That was like a playoff game to me. Like, there are playoff games in November. They just aren't called playoff games.
Yeah,
so,
I think even going to 8, I mean, 8's not a lot, but I think it would make the season a lot less interesting, a lot less fun.
Well, for example,
just look at the end of last year.
Ohio State, Oklahoma this year, if we had an 18 playoff, it means Alabama, if there's an 18 playoff, is going to get in every year. Probably.
Yeah.
Like, they could lose any game and get in.
At 8, you lose those games at the end of the season. They're not like de facto playoff games anymore. Like the Ohio State-Michigan game, that wouldn't even really have mattered.
Right.
Michigan probably still gets in, even with the loss to us.
Yeah, they probably sneak in at like 6, 7, or 8. I mean, yeah.
And then the Big Ten championship, it was basically a playoff game.
Right.
Penn State, Wisconsin, the winner goes, the loser is out. That probably wouldn't really have mattered either.
Yeah.
You would definitely get some 3-loss teams in there probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
I think it's perfect right now. Absolutely perfect.
No, really
I always thought that it needed to be more than 2 because, that was ridiculous.
There's just more parity. There's just more kids. There's more talent. I mean, I think every year, I know there's been a couple blowouts in the playoff, but every year those 4 teams people felt like could make a run. And like Ohio State proved in 14 that, everyone thought that first year that Alabama and Florida State were the 2 best teams, and they would have played in the BCS title game. Oregon and Ohio State deserved to be in the title game after they won their 2 games handedly, especially Oregon is what I mean. And so I don't know. Yeah, I think it's really good right now. And I mean, this is a topic that we could talk about in any podcast or preseason, postseason, but I think it's just important to keep in mind that when you guys are like, the playoffs should be more than 4 teams, playoff games are going to start happening. Ohio State, Penn State is pretty much a playoff game.
There are a lot of playoff games at the end of the season that aren't technically playoff games, but they...
I mean, Auburn, Alabama, Notre Dame, Stanford. I mean, there's so many games. There's so many more that I can think of that are like playoff. I mean, let's say, if Washington State want to slip up, or even if they do have 1 loss, that could be the Apple Cup could be a playoff game. So,
people, like you said, money and that kind of stuff drives everything. But people should really consider like what kind of effect it would have on the rest of the season,
right? Which
in the sport.
A lot of money still made and stuff. So I don't know. Yeah, but So do you have anything else to add? And we'll wrap it up, I guess.
Yeah.
But,
later in the week we'll have some, picks.
Yeah.
Maybe we can try to get them out or something.
I can probably. I guess what I could do maybe is get some, and I'll post it in the description. But like I'll add it. I can add it in the description, like what some of our like best picks are, like what we have in there. That's something I can do since this pod's on Sunday. He doesn't live in Columbus, so it's kind of tough to get a pod up. Like we used to be able to do it during the middle of the week, and it was really easy to get like solid bets in, have a little bit more of a feel for the games based on like injuries and like a little more analysis. So. But yeah, I guess until the next
that was a crazy pick by you guys.
Yeah, I'm a Dolphins fan. They came back and beat Atlanta because they love choking away games. So yeah, until next time.